I never wanted trouble. Just a quiet life in my suburban home, where I could grill on weekends, mow my lawn in peace, and not deal with unnecessary drama. But peace? That wasn't an option. Not with Karen running the HOA like a dictator. She had short, blonde hair styled like she was about to file a complaint at any given moment. Her eyes? Always squinting, scanning the neighborhood for anything remotely out of place. A wrinkle-free blouse, clipboard in hand, and an attitude that screamed, "I own this place." That was Karen. From the day I moved in, she made it her mission to be the self-appointed law enforcement of the community. Nothing escaped her scrutiny. Not the color of my front door, not the position of my trash bins, not even the way I parked on my own driveway. Started small, petty notices stuffed in my mailbox. Grass exceeds HOA length requirements. It was an inch too high. Your garbage cans were left out too long. By 15 minutes. Your mailbox doesn't match the approved neighborhood color. What even was approved? First, I ignored it. But when she started fining me for nonsense violations, I knew I had to push back. "You can't just make up rules, Karen," I told her one afternoon when she cornered me near my driveway. She gave me that condescending smirk, the kind that made your blood pressure rise. "Actually, I can. It's all in the HOA guidelines. You should have read them before moving in." That's when I knew I wasn't dealing with a reasonable person. Karen lived for this. The breaking point. One evening, I came home after a long day, ready to unwind. But as I turned into my street, something made me slam on the brakes. Karen's shiny white SUV sat right across my driveway. Parked. Blocking. Everything. I honked. No response. I got out, walked up to her car, and knocked on the driver's side window. She wasn't inside. I checked my security cameras. There she was, standing on my lawn, clipboard in hand, inspecting my property like she was an appraiser. "Karen," I called out, trying to keep my voice calm. "You're blocking my driveway." She barely glanced at me before flipping a page on her clipboard. "I'm conducting an inspection. You've received multiple warnings about your non-compliant landscaping." Landscaping? I looked around. My lawn was freshly cut, my bushes trimmed. There was nothing wrong. "Move your car, Karen." She let out a dramatic sigh, as if I was the problem. "I'll be done soon. Have some patience." I clenched my jaw. She was trespassing, blocking my property, and acting like I was inconveniencing her. "Move it. Now." She stared at me, then laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, Ethan, maybe if you followed the rules, you wouldn't have these issues." Then, she turned her back on me and walked away. That's when I made a decision. No more warnings. No more playing nice. Karen had messed with the wrong homeowner. Ethan wasn't the type to start fights, but he sure as hell knew how to finish them. After Karen's little stunt of blocking his driveway, he decided enough was enough. He could have let it slide. He could have taken the high road. But why should he? Especially when Karen had declared war first. So, he did what any rational person would do. He got to work. The paper trail begins. First, Ethan dug through the HOA bylaws like a lawyer preparing for trial. Most people ignored these documents, but he knew that somewhere in the fine print, there had to be something useful. And oh boy, did he hit the jackpot. According to the HOA's own rules, no member, including board members, could obstruct another homeowner's access to their property. Not even temporarily. Violators could be fined $100 per day. Interesting. Next, he checked city property laws and discovered something even better. Due to the weird way the neighborhood was zoned, his driveway wasn't technically classified as part of his property. It was legally considered a private road. Privately owned road. His mind started spinning. Ideas formed. Plan took shape. Karen doubles down. While Ethan gathered ammo, Karen wasn't sitting idle either. She turned up the heat, throwing every petty rule in the book at him. One morning, he woke up to a bright pink violation notice taped to his front door. Grass exceeds HOA length limit. Immediate trimming required. Fine, $50. Funny because he had just mowed it 2 days ago. The next day, another notice. Trash bins visible from the street. Fine. $75. Except the bins were still inside his garage. Then came the real kicker. A formal HOA complaint accusing him of disturbing the peace because he was seen smiling when Karen struggled to parallel park. Yes, smiling. The absurdity of it all almost made him laugh. Almost. But Karen wasn't just harassing him with fines. She was running a full-on smear campaign. Whispers spread through the neighborhood. Ethan was difficult. Ethan was a troublemaker. Ethan was a bad influence. A few older residents started giving him judgmental looks. Some neighbors hesitated before waving. Karen was trying to isolate him, thinking he'd fold under the pressure. She had no idea who she was dealing with. The loophole that changed everything. With all the pieces in place, Ethan pulled the trigger. Since his driveway was legally a private road, he could enforce his own rules, just like the HOA did with the neighborhood streets. That's when the toll booth idea was born. Started as a joke. But the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. If Karen wanted to block his driveway like she owned it, why not make it official? Using his construction skills, Ethan built a legitimate-looking toll booth at the entrance of his driveway. A sturdy wooden post, a crossbar arm, even a laminated, private road, pay TO pass sign. For added effect, he installed a security camera, flashing red lights, and a small speaker system. The price? $5 per entry. It wasn't about the money. It was about sending a message. Karen sees red. The day after installation, chaos erupted. Ethan sat in his living room, sipping coffee, when he heard a furious pounding on his door. Karen. She didn't even wait for him to answer before unleashing her wrath. You can't do this. This is illegal. You are violating HOA policy. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, completely unfazed. Actually, Karen, according to the HOA rules, homeowners can't obstruct each other's property. And since my driveway is classified as a private road, I have full control over it. You, however, have been illegally parking on it. So you owe me, let's see, about $100 in daily fines. Her face turned a shade of red usually reserved for fire hydrants. You think you're funny? The HOA won't stand for this. Ethan smiled. Let them come. The HOA meltdown. Karen wasted no time. Within an hour, 3 other HOA board members stood outside his house, arms crossed, demanding an explanation. Ethan didn't argue. He simply showed them the paperwork, his driveway's classification, the HOA's own bylaws, and the city's legal definition of a private road. One of them, a man named Greg, actually chuckled. Well, damn. He's not wrong. Karen's jaw nearly hit the sidewalk. You're siding with him? Greg shrugged. Legally, he can do it. That's when Karen called the police. The police get involved. 2 officers arrived, clearly expecting some kind of major dispute. Karen immediately launched into a hysterical rant about illegal structures, fraudulent tolls, and neighborhood terrorism. Ethan? He simply handed the officers the same legal documents. One officer read through them, then looked up at Karen. Ma'am, he's within his rights. His driveway is a private road. He's allowed to enforce tolls. But, if anything, you're the one in violation for blocking his access. You're lucky he didn't tow your car. That shut her up. Ethan could see the gears turning in her head, searching for a way to flip the situation. But there was no way out. Checkmate. As Karen stood there, fuming and speechless, Ethan decided to twist the knife just a little more. He pulled out an HOA fine notice, the same type she had been using against him, and handed it to her. Karen, since you've been illegally blocking my private road, per HOA regulations, I'm issuing a $100 fine, payable immediately. For the first time since their feud began, Karen had nothing to say. She snatched the paper, stomped away, and slammed her door so hard a porch light flickered. Ethan just smiled, walked back inside, and turned on his security camera feed. The booth wasn't coming down anytime soon. Karen stormed into the neighborhood meeting, face flushed with fury. She slammed a stack of papers onto the table, scanning the room for support. We need to take action. This, this nonsense with the toll booth is an insult to our community. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd, but no one was as outraged as she expected. Across the room, Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, amused. "Take action, HOA Karen?" A voice spoke up. It was Mr. Lawson, a retired veteran who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. "Ethan's not breaking any rules. You're just mad because you can't control him." Karen's nostrils flared. "He's extorting us, charging people to use the street in front of his house. Are we really going to allow that?" "Correction." Ethan finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "I'm charging to use my driveway. The same driveway you blocked." Someone chuckled. Mrs. Patel, who had always hated Karen's nitpicking, smirked. "Frankly, I think it's brilliant." Karen's composure cracked. "This isn't funny. He's making a mockery of the HOA." Ethan tapped his fingers on the table. "Karen, I followed every rule in your handbook. The bylaws don't prohibit a toll booth on private property." He reached into his folder and pulled out documents. "In fact, legally, my driveway qualifies as a private roadway under city regulations. You parked illegally. That is what the police will care about." Karen sputtered, gripping the edge of the table. You can't just." A knock on the door interrupted her. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside. "Got a call about an illegal toll booth?" Karen sprang up. "Yes, he's extorting the entire neighborhood. He's blocking access to people's homes." Ethan stood, adjusting his watch. "Actually, officer, I have all the paperwork right here." He handed over a neatly arranged stack of permits, zoning laws, and HOA guidelines. "Everything is within legal limits. But while you're here, I'd like to report an actual violation. Karen illegally blocked my driveway for an extended period. I have timestamps, footage, and multiple witness statements." The officer flipped through the documents, occasionally exchanging glances with his partner. A slow nod followed. "From what I'm seeing, this toll booth isn't violating any laws, but Karen, you did obstruct private property." Karen's jaw dropped. What?" The second officer clicked his pen. "That's a finable offense, and depending on how long you blocked it, we could be looking at additional penalties." Ethan, ever the opportunist, leaned in slightly. "Oh, and as per HOA regulations, which Karen herself enforces, repeated parking violations incur daily fines." He grinned. "By my calculations, Karen owes me, let's see, quite a bit." The color drained from her face. "You can't be serious," she whispered. The officer shrugged. "It's in the bylaws. If the HOA enforces these rules on everyone else, it applies to you too." A snicker rippled through the room. Karen looked around for help, but the very people she had tormented for years were smirking, whispering, some even openly enjoying the spectacle. Rage twisted her features. "This isn't over," she spat, yanking her bag from the chair. "I'll see you in court." Ethan's smirk deepened. "Oh, I was hoping you'd say that. The lawsuit war begins." Karen wasted no time. The next morning, she stormed into her lawyer's office, shoving a thick folder onto the desk. "Sue him for everything." Her attorney flipped through the papers, expression unreadable. "You want to sue him for following the bylaws? He's mocking me, mocking the HOA," she snapped. "Emotional distress, public humiliation. Hell, find a way to claim damages." The lawyer sighed. "I can file, but I'll be honest, this is weak. If anything, it might backfire." Karen's eyes narrowed. "I don't care. Do it." Days later, Ethan received the summons. He skimmed through it, chuckled, then placed a call to his own attorney. Looks like she took the bait. Time to go all in. Within a week, Karen's case was countered with a much bigger, well-documented lawsuit. Ethan compiled years of harassment, including wrongful fines, privacy violations, and even the time she trespassed to measure his grass height. His lawyer smirked. "You know, with all this evidence, she might end up owing you money." That thought delighted Ethan. Court proceedings were scheduled. HOA members whispered behind Karen's back. She could feel the shift. No one feared her anymore. And worst of all, she had walked right into Ethan's trap. Silence hung over the packed HOA meeting room. The air buzzed with tension as homeowners whispered among themselves. At the front, a long table seated the board members, their faces grim. Karen sat stiffly in the center, arms crossed, lips pursed. Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms folded, watching. He didn't need to say anything. The people had spoken. One by one, neighbors stood, venting frustrations. She fined me for having a garden gnome. I got a violation for parking in my own driveway. She reported my kids for playing outside too loudly. The list went on. Faces turned toward the board president, a man who had once defended Karen. Now even he looked exhausted. He cleared his throat. Enough has been said. It's time to vote. A rustle moved through the crowd as hands went up. 1, 2, 10, 20. A wave. Karen's expression darkened. This is ridiculous, she hissed. I did what was best for the neighborhood. No one cared. The count finished, the result undeniable. The president sighed. Majority rules. Karen, you're officially removed from the HOA board. Effective immediately. For the first time, her face paled. A few people clapped. Then more joined in. Someone even cheered. Karen stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. With a furious glare, she stormed out. Days later, Ethan sat on his porch, a grin stretching across his face. A thick envelope rested beside him, his settlement check. The lawsuit had dragged on, but in the end he won. Karen had tried everything. Fake counterclaims, exaggerated emotional distress, even crocodile tears in court. None of it worked. Footage, documents, witness statements, they were all against her. Now the money was his, and he knew exactly what to do with it. Smoke curled into the evening sky. Grills sizzled. Music played. Laughter echoed. Ethan stood by a massive barbecue pit, flipping burgers while neighbors lined up for plates. People filled his yard and spilled onto the street. The whole neighborhood had turned up. Cold drinks clinked. Kids ran around with sparklers. Conversations flowed. One notable absence? Karen. Ethan didn't invite her. No one did. But she watched. From behind her curtains, face twisted in something between jealousy and rage. He raised his drink in a mock toast toward her house, smirking. Weeks passed. Rumors spread. Karen was selling her house. Not surprising. She had lost her power, her influence, her grip over the neighborhood. And without that, what did she have left? One problem. No buyers. Word traveled fast. Realtors struggled. Potential buyers backed out. Who wanted a house with a reputation? Who wanted to live in a place ruled by a tyrant for years? The once pristine property sat on the market, price dropping. One late afternoon, Ethan heard the unmistakable sound of a moving truck. He wandered outside, casually leaning against his toll booth. There she was, Karen, standing by her packed car, hair frizzed, expression bitter. She climbed in, slamming the door. The vehicle rolled forward, straight toward the booth. Ethan stretched, strolling over just as she rolled down her window. Her glare could have melted steel. You can't be serious, she snapped. Ethan smiled. Rules are rules. Her knuckles tightened around the wheel. She could have reversed, tried another way. But no, pride wouldn't let her. A tense moment passed. Then, with a sharp inhale, she reached into her purse, pulled out a few bills, and thrust them forward. Ethan took them, tipping an imaginary hat. Pleasure doing business with you, she growled, hit the gas and sped off, leaving behind nothing but dust, debt, and a ruined reputation. Ethan chuckled, pocketing the cash. Worth every penny.